I hope everyone is enjoying their day to day because I know a couple of people who aren't, and that's probably DeMar DeRozan and his agent. We're going to talk about how the Chicago Bulls have transformed this team without technically moving on from the core three at this point, and how it's really set the Bulls off to be a reformed team, but still maybe have Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine still around. Talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to talk about how the teams that are kind of circling DeMar DeRozan and who's probably going to land the disgruntled star. We're going to get to all that plus a little bit of mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to start off with this. Light topics today. It is a holiday. We'll see how many of you guys are still at home watching the Chicago Bulls Central, but I want to talk about AK and what he's done here. There was a lot of doubt as the season-ending press conference where AK said that he realized that this was not the roster, that this was not the format of players that was needed, and that changes were going to happen. There were a lot of you guys that were pessimistic. Hell, I was pessimistic about the amount of change that happened. I really did go into this offseason thinking that if we see any major change, maybe one member of the core three is going to be gone, something like that. But AK has really reshaped this roster, but technically, none of the core three have moved on to new teams yet. Yes, DeMar DeRozan is still a free agent, but Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic are still on this roster as of right now, as of this recording. That could change by the minute. We'll see what happens with that. But let's go over how AK's reshaped this team. Initially trading Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey was the first kind of moment that, hey, there was going to be some serious changes coming. Josh Giddey, who is a very flawed player, right, but has shown some very serious flashes of being a very solid NBA player. Now, with that said, there's of course doubt around Josh Giddey and exactly what he can be at the NBA level, especially without being able to be a reliable three-point shooter. That's all there. But when you look at him and his playmaking, I've already talked about it. He is in the 90th percentile of players as far as creating open shots for his teammates. Now, that doesn't always convert to assists, and that's why I like to use that stat more than an assist number, because the assist, you only get assists if your teammate actually hits the shot. What that stat shows is that he does have shot creation. So there are a lot of Bulls fans who were wondering and questioning, why are we calling Josh Giddey a playmaker, even though he only averaged 4.8 assists last season? And that was a fair question to ask. But then you look at the 2022-23 season for Josh Giddey. He started all 76 games that he played, as well as him being a very durable player. And in that time, averaging 16 points per game, almost 8 rebounds, and 6.5 assists per game, and almost a steal per game as well. Now, he shot the ball 48% that season and 32% from three, and he's pretty consistent 32% shooter. He takes a little under 2 3-pointers per game, hits it at a 31% clip for his career. Again, I don't think you're ever worried about Josh Giddey becoming some knockdown 3-point shooter, but he does have solid mechanics, and I think getting with Peter Patton, maybe you can turn him into at least a reliable 34% shooter. Maybe that's me being a little too hopeful, but when you look at it last year, 33.7% last season, taking 3 3-pointers per game. So again, he is somebody that can hit the 3-point shot, or he is going to take some 3-point shots. The key is making it more efficient for him. He's increased his 3-point shot every year. Initially taking 4 3-pointers per game his rookie year, hitting that at a 26% clip. The next season, 3.1 3-point attempts per game, hitting that at a 32% clip, and then 3 3-pointer shots per game and hitting that at a 33% clip. So his volume has gone down, but the efficiency has gone up. And that's kind of where you want Josh Giddey to be at, right? If you want him to, ideally, if he can become about a 35% three-point shooter, that's good enough for the things that he does outside of that. Now, being in the mid-range, he can get to the rim. He doesn't always finish around the rim the best, but Josh Giddey, you're getting a player with a lot of gravity that is a playmaker. That's kind of the first player that you added here. Then you go out and you get Jalen Smith. Well, first, Matas Buzelis, right? We got Matas Buzelis next in the draft, a player that many mocks had him going in the top 5. He falls to the Bulls at number 11. A lot of people have him pegged as being one of the players that does have superstar potential in this coming out of that draft. And you guys know, if you watch my draft process, it was Tajon Saloon, Mattis Bucilis, Khalil Ware were my favorite 3 players in this draft. And the fact that the Bulls had an opportunity to walk away with one of those guys, I think was really good for different reasons in each. But you get Mattis Bucilis, a player that has tremendous upside. He was a really good 3-point shooter in high school. We'll see if Peter Patton and this development team can get him back to that. But even outside of that, finishing around the rim, shooting in the mid-range, being able to create that separation. He has a lot of floaters that he can get to, those type of things. The length that he has, the athleticism as well. You got a player, again, young, more athletic, that likes to get out and run. That fits with Josh Giddey. And then you brought in Jalen Smith. Now, Jalen Smith's role is probably going to be one that's, it's probably going to be a bench player. I don't see him passing up Nikola Vucevic, but this is another guy that you got that has tremendous upside, 24 years old, and has flashed a lot of upside already in the NBA. He's a guy that, per his minutes, he gets really good production out of it, and you like to see that. He averaged 9 points per game last year, 5.5 rebounds, 1 assist on 59% shooting, did he? And also shot the ball 42% from 3, taking 2.5 3-pointers per game, basically. Now, he's been somebody over the course of his NBA career has only averaged 16 minutes per game, but his average had really good per-minute production. His per-30 stats look great. I don't like using those. His per-30 is like 20 and 10 player. He's probably not going to play minutes, but the thing that I want to look at is the time that he did get over 20 minutes. That was when he first got traded to Indiana. He averaged 24 minutes per game, 13 points per game, 7 rebounds. He did 37% shooting from 3 on top of that and a block per game. We'll see what minutes he plays because this is a Billy Donovan team. He didn't play Andre Drummond a whole hell of a lot of minutes, but I do think that because Jalen Smith can play next to Vooch a little bit better and more seamlessly because he can stretch the floor a little bit, don't want to turn him into a 3-point shooter, but he can shoot some threes, that there may be more opportunity for him to play next to Vooch than maybe what Andre Drummond did. So a mobile, athletic big that can get out and run, things like that. Those acquisitions really almost alone really changed the athletic profile of the Chicago Bulls and changed it from a team that tried to play fast but didn't necessarily have the personnel to a team that now on paper is shaped up like they're going to play much faster. You look at pairing that with Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams, right, who we did retain as well in Patrick Williams. That brings a really big difference as far as the profile. Now, it doesn't bring the shooting that this team is sorely missing, but we get to that in a second. Then, of course, we re-signed Patrick Williams, re-signed Adama Sanogo, Adama on a 2-way contract, Patrick Williams on that 5-year, $90 million deal that I think is still a reasonable contract for him. But it's a fair, like, you have now gone younger. You have gone considerably younger. The Chicago Bulls, which finished the season as one of the oldest 10 teams in the league, top 10 and oldest teams in the league, now falls down to an average age, and this is still with Zach LaVine on the roster. This is with Torrey Craig on the roster, still with Nikola Vucevic factored in. This team has gone from an average age of almost 28 to an average age of a little over 25. That is considerably younger than this team has gone. And so AK has shown vision to get younger. That is something that this team clearly wanted to do, is get younger, get more athletic. I know I'm not trying to do the Gar Forman. Get younger, get more athletic. And the team has done that. And I got to give AK credit for him coming in, seeing a vision. Now, we got to see how well this vision is going to be executed, right? Because you got some big question marks. How much is Josh Giddey going to actually progress with under the Chicago Bulls, right? That's a big thing. Can we develop Bucilis to be to get the most out of that star level potential that he had in this draft? Does Patrick Williams take a step up, especially with now you giving him the money? Those type of things. But keep in mind, this reshaping of this roster has happened with Zach LaVine still under contract, Nikola Vucevic still under contract, Torrey Craig, Javon Carter, all still under contract, and these are all players. You're going to want some veterans around, so I in no way expect the Bulls to just jettison off all their veterans. But if they can find a deal to move Zach LaVine for some players that are more complementary to what these young guys are trying to do, right, that goes a long way. And so we have seen some reshaping, and the core is still basically here. Now, DeMar DeRozan is a free agent. There's very unlikely that he returns to the Chicago Bulls, even though there is a scenario in which that happens. But that's what's happened. And so when you look at the way that the AK has changed this roster, it's brought new excitement on what this team can be. Now, it's going to be rough. And for Bulls fans holding out hope that we're going to be this team that competes still and maybe can get – somebody said the Bulls team could still be a top 6 team. And I'm like, what are you smoking? Now, I mean, if some great progression happens, maybe, but you know, that's not what we're expecting coming into the season. But this is a season where you expect the style of play to change, to be much different, to be more exciting. and for the young players to finally be prioritized in this. But we still got players on this roster that may take away from them, namely Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. Now, Vooch, I'm not worried about. I've said it. I don't mind Nikola Vucevic staying the starting center on this team this season. I don't mind it. I actually think having a guy that with young players that are stepping into new roles, even Kobe White, what he did last season, but wasn't always consistent in that, having somebody that consistently is going to get you 18 and 11 basically is going to be good for the development of those young guys. And he can pass on top of that. Defensively, listen, this team is going to get cooked defensively right now either way unless, we see some tremendous growth defensively from a few players. But, the fact that this much has changed with Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic and Torrey Craig and Javon Carter still on this roster as of right now, I would have not expected to see this much or feel like that the direction has changed this much with still having those players on the roster. Now, the question is, what are the Bulls' goals? Are they trying to maintain their top 10 protected pick next year for the San Antonio Spurs? If they do that, having Zach LaVine still here and what he's able to do, because he's still going to be able to average 20 points a game for you, may cause that to be some problems. Now, that's up to the trade deadline. If Zach LaVine comes in and balls out, maybe at that point you move him at the trade deadline. But Nikola Vucevic still on this roster. Torrey Craig, who could be a trade sweetener for any other type of deal, still on this roster. The ball-headed Ho and Javon Carter still on this roster as well. And then we still have decisions to be made on Henry Drell, who is a free agent, but on a two-way contract. We'll see if we bring him back on that. And so that's where the Bulls roster sits right now. We have one open roster spot after only sending out technically Andre Drummond and Alex Caruso. Those are the two players that are on their way out. Javonte Green doesn't have a deal yet either. I still think he's probably going to wait around to get that deal from the Chicago Bulls, but we'll see. But the fact that we have this much change with so much still staying the same, I think shows just how focused AK truly was when he said in that press conference that changes were coming. He meant it, and he's gone out there and he's done that. And of course, we got to see how successful those changes are. In no way am I saying just because we made changes, it means that we're on a better path. And it's going to be initially a step back to take a step forward. That is what I have been calling for this team to do for a long time. Being willing to take a step back to take a longer term step forward with adding a foundation. And they got some still questions. The fact that Josh Giddey is going to be a restricted free agent next offseason brings some questions, because if Giddey does ball out, if he goes back to that 17-6-6 player, that's going to get you over $20 million. Now, if you do send off Zach LaVine, if you could move Nikola Vucevic between now and the start of next season, right? Not this upcoming season, but next season, that of course adds some more room. But you're looking at easily a $20 to $28 million player in Josh Giddey if he just gets back to those numbers, no matter how flawed every other part of his game is. So they have put themselves back in a position where you could be paying somebody initially with only getting a year sample size, which isn't the greatest thing to do, but we'll see. That the Bulls have changed their direction, and the change isn't completed yet. We still got, like I said, the core three: Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, all still looking for new homes as of right now. I keep saying as of right now because by the time I post this, something could change. You never know, right, with how this free agency is gone. But you got to give credit for AK for having a vision of going younger, going more athletic, a different play style. But we still got some big questions on three-point shooting. Now, if Zach LaVine comes back, Zach, Henry Drell, Kobe White, Ayo, because Ayo did step up, and Patrick Williams are the players are looking the most to make leaps three-point shooting-wise, maybe even Julian Phillips, right, to bring some of that three-point shooting. But as of right now, we're shaped up to be a team that is going to lack some serious three-point shooting. Now, that's not everything. We've seen teams be solid without three-point shooting, and again, we don't know if the Bulls' goal is even how many games they're trying to win. But, ultimately, the Bulls have majorly retooled, and the only thing that's keeping me from calling it a rebuild yet is the fact that the core three is still on the roster, right? That's the only thing stopping me from calling it that. Once DeMar is officially gone, once Zach, Vooch are officially gone, at that point, it's kind of hard to deny the Bulls have rebuilt their roster. The question is just how successful is that rebuild going to be? Now, one of the questions that I just mentioned in that is DeMar DeRozan, and the question on where DeMar will go is kind of the question right now in free agency. DeMar is probably the best free agent left out on the market. 17th in scoring in the NBA last year. And over the last day or so, we've gotten the Kings are reportedly a team that's interested in DeMar DeRozan. They could offer Kevin Huerter $16 million contract. The Bulls could then throw in a Torrey Craig to make that work because we can only acquire about $14 million. You throw in a Torrey Craig, you can make that deal work. Is that something that the Kings would take? Give us a second-round pick, Kevin Huerter. That's probably the deal you're looking for. I saw a deal going on with Kevin Huerter and Duarte. I don't think that works with what the Bulls' cap limitations are, even if they did throw in Torrey Craig, maybe if Javon Carter's included. Will you take Javon Carter, Kings? Kings fans, will you take the ball-headed hoe off my hands? But with that said, so the Kings are there. The Heat have been mentioned anywhere between being a favorite to kind of falling out of it. They had expected kind of a response in 24 hours. Doesn't seem like they got that. They do have the contracts that can make that work. They also have multiple second-round picks in 2026, which they can make kind of work in that. And then reportedly, over the last 24 hours, the Spurs have been mentioned there as well as a team that could be interested. And then, of course, the Lakers, their name's going to be mentioned if anything that goes on with almost any free agent at this point. But it all leads to the same outcome. DeMar DeRozan isn't going to get the money that he initially hoped he was going to get in the free agent market. Now, could he still get $20 million? There are a lot of those teams that could make that work. The Spurs have the money to sign him outright, as do the Orlando Magic. Those are two teams that if they just wake up and decided, hey, you know what? Yeah, we can add a 20-point per game scorer in here. We can factor it. If they do, DeMar can sign with their outright one-year deal, go back on the market, and maybe hopefully revamp his value, things like that, to get more money going forward. But DeMar has basically ended up in the same exact place he was 3 years ago. When DeMar was a free agent in 2021, one of the things that stood out there is that the money just wasn't there for him. And he thought that he was joining the Lakers, but then they ended up trading for Russell Westbrook. And then it got left with, there just was not the money that DeMar DeRozan commanded, right? The Bulls end up sliding in there. They give him the money they want because they were desperate to become a playoff team. The rest is history. But DeMar finds himself right back. He is a player that is still effective. I never want to talk about DeMar DeRozan like he's a player that can't still produce and put up numbers, because he can. But he's a player that the league has basically gone away from the type of player that DeMar DeRozan is. That's just the facts of the matter of where it stands right now. We have moved on from who DeMar DeRozan is as a player, as a league. That doesn't mean there aren't still mid-range players. There are still that. But the fact that he doesn't offer anything defensively, the fact that he is a player that can be highly effective, but in the mid-range, doesn't really shoot as many threes modernly, which limits his game, and he's a player that doesn't like to play off ball. But even with all that said, he's a player that was 17th in the league in scoring last season. 4 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, 48% shooting from the field. The fact that he's one of the best scorers in the NBA, he sits very high on that all-time list without three-pointers made. DeMar DeRozan is still a player that can help you, but what the league is telling us is that the value that the league sees in DeMar is less than the value contract-wise, money-wise, that he sees in himself. And him and his agent got to ultimately make a decision. Now, the Bulls are willing to facilitate a sign and trade if possible. We'll see what happens there. The Bulls do, if a team is over the cap and they want to offer him more than the mid-level exception, it has to be a sign and trade at that point. So the Bulls do sit in a place where they could have some power there. We'll see what ultimately happens with DeMar DeRozan, but this is one of the things that everybody's watching out for now in free agency, and we'll see how it goes for him. But before we go, it is 4th of July. Let's go ahead and get into one voicemail. This one's from Jamal.
What's up, Haize? It's your boy Jamal back again with another voicemail for you. 3 minutes, let's get into it. So I'm going to probably leave you 2 voicemails. This one's just going to be talking about the signings of Jalen Smith and Patrick Williams. Let's start off with the obvious. Patrick Williams, 5 years, $90 million, $18 million per year. I kind of expected them to keep him. I knew it was going to be between, like you stated, and a lot of people stated, somewhere between 15 and 20 million we were going to get him for. And I got to say, I was hoping they'll become towards the 15 than the 20, but it's not a bad signing. It's going to be interesting to see how we progress now with if we do trade Zach, get with Alonzo, DeMar, Vooch, there's not going to be any excuses for Patrick anymore. You're going to automatically be probably a first, a second, if not third option player. You're going to be getting your touches, so there's not going to be the same excuses that we some of us made from last year, the past couple of years, where it's like, oh, he's a 4th overall pick, but he's playing behind 3 or 4 different players with more experience than what a normal 4th overall pick would be getting, so his shots ain't coming like they used to be. Now we're going to see what you can really do, because you're not going to have anybody, maybe Kobe at the most, who's in front of you as far as scoring and getting touches. So we'll see where that goes. As far as Jalen Smith goes, love it. I don't know why, if I'm being that typical Bulls fan who every time there's this one player that always seems to play really well against us, fought against us, we always be like, let's go sign him. That's how I feel about him. But hopefully this works out well. But I think he's going to be very good for us. He might not get you a solid, I'm not looking for him to be a 20 and 10 guy. It'd be nice, but I don't need that from him. But if he can give us a solid 15 and 10, be a nice rim runner, rim protector, things like that, play that pick and roll very well, and hit some threes already. He doesn't have to fall in love with the three, but hit them at a consistent rate. He's going to fit in well for him. And plus, he's young. So he's going to be one and one with the other guys. And we can see if he's really cut out to be a starter or if all the years that he was playing backup was because he was meant to be a backup player. We shall see. As always, a C-Wed, go Bulls. Peace.
Listen, I agree with everything you said. The P. Will signing, I don't mind. It is about how he progresses over this time, and he doesn't have any excuses. Now, Zach is still on this roster. Vooch is still on this roster, which would still put him far down in the pecking order because Kobe's going to be ahead of him, things like that. But this is a now season where he has to be more aggressive. He has to be. Whether he plays the 3, whether he plays the 4, Patrick Williams has to be more aggressive, and he has to show, hey, I'm going to progress. This deal is going. He has the chance to either make this deal a steal or this can end up being a very vast overpay for a role player. That's the way that it could be. 22 years old, about to be 23. He still has tons of room to grow, but we just got to see if that's going to happen. The he's only 22 label only get you so far. You've been in the NBA now going on your 5th year. It is time now. Kobe did it in his 5th year. Yes, he's came into a different role, but Patrick Williams has to show some serious growth this season, at least in my opinion. As far as Jalen, yeah, I don't think he'll get the minutes or the prioritization to get 15 and 10 unless Vooch is traded, but I still like Jalen Smith as an upside pick. What he can bring, he's not done uncovering his game at all. What he can bring as a stretch the floor big, as well as rebounding-wise, getting out in transition. I think Josh Giddey's really going to like playing with Jalen Smith and vice versa, and Ayo Dosunmu for that matter, because of the way that Ayo pushed the break last season was great as well. So I look at those things. Jalen Smith is going to be a really good signing for the Bulls. The money, $9 million, that's nothing. So, I mean, giving me $9 million, but outside of that, like it's a very reasonable contract, and it's a low risk, very high reward deal that we gave Jalen Smith and the player that he is. And we'll see if the Bulls can come out on the other side of that with a still in free agency. Let's hope so. But that's my time for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.